I was thinking about what's been going right. Of all in the last 5 games that has been going right, what is the biggest thing? And I'm starting to feel like it's the coordinators. Aaron Glenn was under heavy fire earlier in this year. The idea that the plug might get pulled on Aaron Glenn was a popular one, right?
It actually was. And looking back, it's embarrassing, right?
Yeah.
I mean, looking back at it.
Neither of us called for his job.
Well, no, but I mean, I think just but were we stepping in that direction? I mean, I think we had asked the question, like, do they have an Aaron Glenn problem here because the defense was so bad, and it's his defense, it's his stamp. But one change to the personnel, the coaching staff, has made a world of difference. And it's not just that. I mean, obviously, there are things that they didn't practice and then players that were promoted. But there's whatever it was, he's changed things around and done a complete 180 with this thing. I mean, they were the worst defense in football, maybe in football history, going for a while there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what a remarkable turnaround that this team has had. And I don't think he can get enough credit right now for that turnaround. And the same side, what Ben Johnson has done with, so little to work with most of the time because of all the injuries that they've suffered with the wide receivers and the offensive line and, DeAndre Swift in and out of the lineup. Trading TJ Hawkinson. All these things that just keep, blow after blow to the offense, and yet it's a top 10 offense. And now we're looking at this team, and the way they've played, winning 4 of the last 5 games, and the game they lost, they could have won. This is a team that's playing its best football right now. And dare I say, they're fun to watch, offensively and defensively. I like watching this team on defense and seeing, okay, if the team's going to, if there's a pass play, I want to see the defensive line get a rush in. Now I'm watching for Houston. Is Houston out there? Because the guy just makes plays.
Mm-hmm.
And then when somebody gets tackled, it feels like there's a 1 in 10 chance that ball is going to pop loose. Because these guys are swarming around the football, and they are ripping at that football. And that's what they've been taught. That's how they've been coached, and that's the type of player they are. And when you go back to a couple of years ago when Dan Campbell was announced as the head coach, Brad Holmes was announced as the general manager, it was more so when Campbell was announced. And he talked about that grit. And he talked about biting kneecaps and taking a hunk here and all that stuff. And they're not going to quit. They're going to be relentless and gritty and all that. And he wanted football players that loved to play football and this and that. A lot of it seemed like it could have been rhetoric. But it really isn't. That is the culture that they wanted to instill in this team. And I feel like the players are absolutely reflecting that culture right now. I sure hope this doesn't shut down and we're going to see them go on a losing streak. I don't want to see any of that because it takes away all that goodwill and faith. But because this team was so young, when they built this team through youth, they built it through the draft. They've acquired players that are younger for the most part. Because of that, they've been able to mold this team into what they want it to be rather than having, we got a bunch of 7-year vets on this team that are already set in their ways and they're not going to listen to it. I think it's very impressive how they've built this team. A lot of credit goes to Brad Holmes for acquiring the players, and Jared Goff's one of them. Goff comes into this, and I don't know if he'll admit that he had a chip on his shoulder, but the way things worked out in Los Angeles, he was clearly scapegoated, and I would have a chip on my shoulder if I were him. And halfway through last season, it seemed like Dan Campbell there was a time where I don't even want to say almost, he did call out Jared Goff and said at one point, our quarterback play has to be better. And then it was. And having the confidence, and he's talked about it, where the offensive coordinator and the head coach both believe in you and they're positive about things, and that can make a change. And I feel like that's where that change happened.
Think about this. 5 weeks ago, they fired a defensive coach. If that announcement that day had been that the defensive coach had been fired was Aaron Glenn, everybody in Detroit, and probably us, would have been like, well, yeah.
Yeah.
5 weeks later, Aaron Glenn has got this defense allowing less than 20 points a game in this stretch, which would rank in the top 10 in the NFL, which doesn't mean much. I don't need you to be a great 5-week defense. I need you to be a great 17-week defense. But in the last 5 weeks, they've been less than 20 points a game. And look at the young players that the arrow is pointing up. Kirby Joseph, arrow pointing up. Malcolm Rodriguez maybe he's leveled off a little bit, but he's still a good player and a rookie contributor. Aleem McNeil, arrow pointed up. John Kaminsky, arrow pointed up. Jeffrey Okudah, arrow pointed up. Aiden Hutchinson, Derek Barnes, James Houston, Josh Pascal. These are all young first, second, or third-year players. And look, there's reminders all the time, but this is patience paying off. There was a belief that Dan Campbell had in Aaron Glenn. He oddly fired a position coach, which nobody saw coming, and stuck with the defensive coordinator. And this defensive coordinator has got this team playing better. Now, Justin Fields gave him a hard time, but that's the most points they've given up in a game was the game of Chicago. But the defense, it was a Chicago game, wasn't it?
Yes, they get. Well, actually, yeah. Well, they won 30. They won it 31-30.
It's the most points they gave up in a game.
They gave it 26 to the Bills. So yeah.
But the defense made the stop at the end, right?
Yeah. I think you have to look at the teams you face. These aren't necessarily offensive juggernauts that they faced, but when you face Buffalo and you lose on last second play, basically the last 40 seconds in the game, there's a drive that gets it done. Okay, it's deflating, and there were plays that were missed out there in the field, but that's the odds-on favorite to win the Super Bowl, and you hung with them to the end. Then you follow that up with a game against Jacksonville, who is trending in the right direction, and you just stomp them out 40-14. That's impressive. Now you're at home again against the Vikings, and it seems like this is just a repeating story we got here, but it's validate what you just did, and that's what this is. It's the whole season is about validating what you did in the week prior. Go out and do it again. The Vikings are going to win this division, but if I kind of feel like this is playoff mentality right now. Treat this like it's a playoff game.
You said earlier, like, you almost feel embarrassed that you're asking or maybe,
losing faith in Aaron Glenn.
Yeah. You shouldn't be, because he was bad. This defense was terrible 5 weeks ago. They still rank at the bottom of a lot of defensive categories. They're clearly playing better, and there was patience did pay off. Sometimes it doesn't. So far it has in this case, and I'm glad they kept Aaron Glenn because, like I said, they're playing a lot better, and it's showing on the field. But they were really bad, Gator. Don't be embarrassed. I mean, if they would have fired Aaron Glenn, like you said, Doug, we all would have been like, yep. They were the worst defense in the league. What else are you supposed to do?
Right, but if he wasn't the problem, I guess that's the thing. It's like if the problem, and it wouldn't be obvious to us because we're not there at practice.
Yeah.
Maybe it was so obvious to them of like, well,
whatever
here's the problem. You're not on board with what we're trying to do, or whatever the reason was. They got rid of Aubrey Pleasant. It's worked out.